JPMorgan is out here saying that we need legislative clarity in the U.S. around crypto assets, especially in light of recent actions by the SEC. Now, this one stood out to me because I feel like this is something we hear from the industry itself very often. Hey, the legislative process is where we need to focus our energies. Hey, we need to get some clear laws on the books rather than going back and forth on the regulatory whims of whoever the SEC chair is at any given year. So this to me is interesting because it suggests that the moneyed people, the banks of the world, they also want legislative clarity in addition to maybe a little bit more precision on the regulatory front. So I thought this one was interesting that JPMorgan seems to be siding with industry on this one as it relates to the push in DC for laws around crypto assets rather than just regulation by enforcement. I got to toss to Will, shouted him out in the intro. What do you think about this one? Interesting maybe to see JPM take a stance on this, but I could be wrong. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they had to take a stance at some point, right? This was a huge thing that shook up last week. And Zach, I liked your intro because last week we were all talking about like how sad things were, right, with Binance and Coinbase. And it is indeed a fresh week. So we'll see what horrors are in store for us. I think all these big banks are going to be watching what's happening with Coinbase and with Binance. Every financial company has some exposure to crypto at some point in some place right now. So this is going to pretend like a lot of different involvement for these companies and these banks, right? Just think of JPMorgan. They have a large stake in Consensus, which Consensus is a very large Ethereum fund, right? They have Ethereal, or at least they had Ethereum at one point. They have a lot of different tech stacks for Ethereum itself. So JPMorgan definitely has a dog in this fight, as do many of these other companies. And we'll talk about Robinhood in a little bit. Like, they're delisting tokens, right? And their trading volume is going down. Same sort of story. So watching this from a higher level, like a TradFi level, like these people care as much as they do, like shoo it and don't want to talk about digital assets. At this point, it does make up some of their money. So they're going to have an opinion on it. Wendy?
So I don't really care for JPMorgan. There was other news that came out this morning, which I won't talk about on this show. But we do know that the banks have been invested in the crypto industry for quite some time, especially Bitcoin. And I think that this is just kind of a show that they're playing. I feel like in the past, we've seen JPMorgan like say terrible things about crypto and Bitcoin and then say positive things. So it's kind of like they flip flop. But we do know that the institutions do want to have complete control over this industry because that's where they profit. And crypto assets are a direct threat to their bottom line. And that's all that these people care about. So I feel like it is good that they're coming out and saying this. However, they're not on our side. They're not on the non-accredited investor side. They're just in it and they're just saying positive things because they want regulatory clarity so they can capitalize off of the industry. Jen?
Whoa, that was a spicy take, Wendy. I'm not sure that I can follow it with such vigor, but I think the bank report is right? Every time we read one of these bank reports, we all can kind of agree that, what's being said here is not something, really new, but it's something that we need to continue to talk about to continue the conversation forward. What I focused on here is that the report says that crypto could start moving into decentralized entities and also overseas. So we're going to talk about that overseas part a little bit later, but that decentralized entities part was really interesting to me, given the fact that there was a ruling in the CFTC case recently against UkiDAO, and the ruling was a default judgment, but it was against UkiDAO. And we'll remember that the CFTC came after the DAO. They didn't have anyone's full name or address. The DAO was served in the Discord, and now the CFTC has won that case. So even if U.S. regulators can push crypto companies into DeFi or push crypto companies away from the U.S., it seems like they still have a grasp on these firms. And this is something that I think regulators are really going to need to figure out. I think we need not only clear regulatory frameworks, but clear instruction on how entities outside of the U.S. need to work and what entities outside of the U.S. need to do to ensure that U.S. citizens don't have access to their products. And then instruction on what happens if U.S. citizens get access to those products. There's so many layers to this. I think it's just going to be so difficult to come to a conclusion or a solution by the end of the year. I saw someone's hand go up, but I don't know whose it was.
I think my hand went up, but I think I heard you say the incorrect thing. Can you go back and repeat what you said about somebody getting served as was it NFT or something like that? I'm sorry.
No, UkiDAO, decentralized autonomous organization, were served in their Discord for, I believe it was offering unregistered securities for their governance token. They were served there, and a judgment has just come down. The CFTC has a default judgment, so they've won the case.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I was going to kind of comment and talk about how much hypocrites these people are and how the U.S. government is directly against crypto currently, but they went ahead and then used Coinbase's services to liquidate some of the holdings that they had confiscated. So it's like, it's a menagerie, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bitcoin angle here is interesting, right? So we saw that video from Brian Armstrong over the weekend. It was from Wall Street Journal interview with Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. And they talked about how the SEC has sort of pivoted, right? A year ago, they were not giving a lot of information or disclosures on what they saw about the crypto market. And then he said about 1 year ago, it started changing to where it was basically everything is security but Bitcoin. And so I think that's the government's purview right now, or at least SEC under the current administration. So one thing I wanted to go back to what Jen was talking about is like these foundations and these teams and these token groups, right? How will these things evolve? I think we've actually sort of seen them evolve already. Most of these token shops, how they're built is they'll set up a foundation, they'll be offshore, and then they'll build an entity within the US that's licensed to use like the IP of it. And so you are like having this sort of like shell and protection because most of your company or your foundation is a nonprofit offshore, right? So like the SEC can't really go after them, or at least they think the SEC won't go after them. Then everybody else who's maybe a developer or like does business development for the project lives in the US typically and is trying to grow the US market because that's where a lot of cash and capital is. I'm wondering if that changes over time. As of right now, especially with these cases as of last week, Binance and Coinbase, it looks like the SEC is just going to go after the exchanges. They're not going to go after ADA. They're not going to go after Solana. They're not going to go after Matic. Those things are in the documentation, right? They're in the notices and the lawsuits. But it's not like the SEC is going after them. They're just going to go and try to starve the liquidity from these exchanges. And then maybe down the road, they go after these tokens if they think it's valuable. Zach, to you.
I saw Jen's hand, so I got to toss it her way first.
I just want to fact check myself. It wouldn't make sense that the CFTC went after UkiDAO for offering unregistered securities. They went after them for operating an illegal trading platform and unlawfully acting as an unregistered futures commission merchant. Zach, take it away.
Good fact check. That was awesome. I just want to say, Leah, I mean, market participants, they want clarity, right? That's how people make money. They don't want to run afoul of the laws. They don't want to be the next Robinhood to have to delist assets that their regulatory team thought was kosher. So I think when you see JPM and other big institutions come out and say, hey, this is what we need clarity so that we can make money, that certainly makes sense. And that's certainly what a lot of people in this space are clamoring for. For them to come out, I think they're an interesting messenger because it does suggest sort of institutional backing to some of these big ideas that the crypto hordes have been arguing for years.